Palau-Rivas reasons, and today we have a special guest, Brandon Chase Davidson. Want to say uh, a little formal introduction to everyone?
Sure. My name is Brandon. I've been friends with Anthony for a little while. I am a full-time pastor here in the state of Mississippi and have been for about 6.5 years. And um, he asked me to give my thoughts on such matters of existence and morality, destiny, and thoughts about God. So here we are.
Yeah. So the first overarching question is, what is the evidence that God exists, or any form of supreme creator or deity? Just what is the evidence that points to something before everything?
Right. And my answer will be, of course, from my own perspective, the way I see things. But the way I see it is there's a popular, very common belief that the Big Bang gave place to evolution, which gave place to all of our current worldly systems and human existence. Um, the way I see it, if we just take a look at what the Big Bang theory claims, is that an atomic explosion, microscopic, nearly nothing exploded in early billions of years ago space, and that brought forth matter and gravitational systems, an organized pre-solar system arrangement. That these extremely heated rocks ended up cooling and bringing forth oxygen-based matter and life forms and proteins enough to make tissues, to form bodies, to form intelligent creatures that we have now. And I just don't see it that way. It would it's not something that we can replicate. There's no way, no matter how much time we give to this approach, that we could nuke a portion of space and bring something out of that nuclear explosion. And I'm calling it that because that is how it's described. A subatomic particle explodes, divides. Nobody was there, so who really knows what happened to it? It is a theory, and that brought forth this massive amount of energy that spawned matter. But that just cannot happen. It can never happen, and has never happened at any stage of observable history. And that is why it's a theory, is because we cannot replicate it at all, which is part of the scientific method. I don't think that a nuclear explosion in an oxygenless environment like space could bring forth any life at all. And where would the life stand? It would stand and live inside of a superheated magma environment. A lava core of a pre-Earth is where this life would live, and I just don't see that. And I also don't think that billions of years of different stages of development brought forth animals which we later became. There would be billions of deaths of not only pre-humans but pre-Cambrian men and then pre-apes and then pre all the way down to pre one-celled organism or single-celled organism. There would be so many flawed versions of what we are now. How how could a being determine that it needs blood before it has veins to pump it? How could a vein filled, blood filled organism pump the blood without needing a heart? And understanding that and adapting to it, and billions of these things without hearts dying in order to develop a heart. To me, that just don't make any sense. And we also don't see any of that happen in our natural world from reading. The Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection, and by reading Darwin's book, The Descent of Man, which are both freely available. He even acknowledges that he don't believe that that happened. He just thinks that it could have, that there is no observable instance of a change of type or an evolving from one type of thing to another thing at any stage of our observable development in the world. So I don't think that it's scientific to say God cannot exist, because that would be a claim from intelligence. Like we know everything about our natural world to know that there is no God. I don't think there's aliens, but I can't prove there's not, because we don't know anything about space except that it's there and we can kind of look at it from a distance. If you were to put a quarter in your hand, the nearest star, if that quarter represented our solar system, all of our planets and the sun, 100 yards from that would be how relative it is to our nearest star. And yet we claim to know what stars are made of, and we claim to know all this stuff, but there's just really no way to know it. What we do know is what we can replicate and what we can do here with things that exist here. And that stuff that they claim happened back then just don't seem to be able to happen the way they say. So I don't believe it. I think that it is just as plausible to believe that there was a intelligent, existent thing that wanted a universe to exist, so it brought it forth. There's just as much credibility to say that the Big Bang had a name, just as to say, oh no, it didn't. Well, how do we know? There's really no way to determine what's not out there. And there's things like the Fermi paradox that would suggest it wasn't some supreme race of aliens that created all things, because then who made them, and so on and so on. I do think that there was a creator. The fact that any further from the sun and humans would freeze, any closer and we would all die from radiation, gamma exposure, and temperatures on Earth that couldn't sustain vegetation. We're right where we need to be, literally, not a degree away from it. And all these earthquakes that have happened through world history, they keep tilting the axis of the world, and we've moved maybe a micron further away or closer to the sun, and that has changed our temperatures on Earth already. So we're right where we need to be. And for me, there is a belief that our moon came from our Earth at some point, that everything kind of flung from each other. Well, we have planets in our solar system that are clockwise, and the moon of that planet turns counterclockwise. And we know that by the conservation of angular momentum, that objects that tear apart from a host object that's spinning, they all spin in the same direction. So if those moons came from their host planet, they would have to spin in the same direction. But we can observe that just don't happen all the time. So kind of seems like they were all made at the same time, instead of forming from billions of years. It's a very common argument that if you gave a monkey a typewriter and enough time to do it, it would print out a novel. But that would assume that the reason that apes can't do stuff like that now is just because we hadn't taught them enough. If you gave an ape enough time and a typewriter, it would not even have the ability to know what a typewriter is. You could train it to push a button, but it is the nature of the creature that it cannot grasp such things like the use of a typewriter. You'd have to spend eons teaching it why a typewriter is even useful. And yet, we humans know exactly why it's useful. Ancient man, all the way back to people like Utsi. who was found in the Italian Alps, had some form of a written language. So we understand these things even in our earliest form. So I don't think we came from apes. And neither did Charles Darwin. He thought that certain races of human came from apes. In his book Descent of Man, that's where he titles that. But he didn't think all humans did, and it's actually quite racist, and it's quite dehumanizing to think such things. You always hear that the cradle of life is Africa. You always hear that. But the reason people say things like that is because they say that's just where the most gorillas are. And they believe humans came from that. And see, I just don't buy all of that. That don't sound good. And it has created a lot of regimes throughout history who killed people based on how they looked, and I don't like that. I don't like it, and I don't buy it. I don't think it makes sense to me after you just look at all the data. I'm not an expert. I don't know everything, but I think that we're here very, very specifically, and that we're here for a reason, and that there is an uncaused first cause. God, if God is real, does not need a creator because he would cease to be God. Everything that we see has an origin, but yet we can't see the origin of anything. We don't know what came first. We don't know if Earth was the first planet formed in this cosmic explosion. We don't know the origin of anything. We just know that everything's here and that it had to come from somewhere. And I would suggest that everything happened all at the same time. The presence of a human heart, veins, blood, brain, all of that kind of points to these things would have to exist at the same time in order to be necessary. There would be an entirely different vascular system, kind of like what's present in cockroaches if humans didn't look exactly how we do right now. The earliest versions of humans that we can find full bodies are just like the bodies we have now. Some of them even still got the skin on them. So I'm convinced that we were all made the same way and that we exist in a universe that is not that old. And it don't have to be that old. There is a law of entropy. That is a law of physics where things are never getting more organized and better. Everything is always getting less organized and worse. So giving something enough time does not produce better, greater, less mutated things. It actually goes against that. So I believe that we have a creator, and I believe that if we do, we need to know who they are and what they want and why they made us. And of course, I am a Christian, so I believe in that worldview and, to answer those questions. But you don't have to be a Christian to pose those same questions. Take any God that you can think of. If it exists, it has a will and a purpose, and it has things that it thinks and feels, and if it made us, then it made us with purpose for a purpose. And I think that mankind should definitely find out what that purpose is. Uh, if God is an unknowable, unseeable, uncommunicatable being, it don't matter because we'll never talk to it anyway. But if God can talk and can interact with us, then we need to do so. So that's just how I feel.
Yeah, dude, that was amazing. Um, so this is now like going on onto a tangent. So, in your personal findings, what have you like? You said that you're a Christian. So, what is your own findings to think that the New Testament and overall the Bible and the scriptures that a Christian would believe in? What is your evidence that it would be reliable enough and evident enough to believe in it and put your trust in it wholeheartedly?
Right. I'll start by saying that I believe all that I believe based on faith. Uh, there are some portions of my faith, my religious belief, that I do just take on faith. And there were people in that day, specifically about 2,000 years ago, there were people of that day who believed the exact same thing that I do. And they claimed, and I say they claim because um, archaeology, Jewish historians like Josephus, Emperor Trajan of Rome, and there are countless other secular slash non-Christian sources who agree. Even in modern times, a man named Bart Ehrman, who is an atheistic scientist and a researcher, he claims that there was a man named Jesus Christ at some point. That is the most knowable, provable fact of history. Now, whether or not we should worship him or whether or not he created everything is a different story. But uh, you cannot be intellectually honest and disagree with the fact that Jesus existed. The Roman government certainly thought he did, and all of Israel certainly thought he did, and India, after the time of Thomas, who claimed to be an eyewitness and a personal follower of this man Jesus, certainly thought he did, and many martyrs from that time died, not saying we're dying for this religion or it is our place to die for this set of beliefs. That's not why a lot of them died. Their testimony, their death letter was, "I know what I saw, and I can't change it. I'm sorry. I believe that this man is to be worshipped, and that's all I can say." And when they would be told to deny it, they said, "Well, I can't deny what I saw." They claimed to be eyewitnesses of supernatural things, so much so that they were willing to die before they lied about it. And that's the ultimate cost. The ultimate cost of a belief or a position or an opinion is your own life. And we see all the time people will change their own, they'll change the narrative on everything they've ever said just to preserve their career. Well, how much more your own life or the death of your family at the Roman government's hand? People would have their entire families executed before they said, no, I didn't see something right in front of me. They just believed it happened. It seems as if there was a 30 some odd year old Jewish man from the tribe of Judah in North Israel named Jesus. And in their own language, it would probably have been Yeshua, who caused a religious stir in that area that millions upon millions of people in that very same year and the years following his death completely latched onto. And it was very emergent and world changing and world spreading. Um, People like the writer Josephus, again, I bring him back up. He didn't believe in Jesus's claims, but he did believe Jesus was a real person and talked to people who saw him up to 20 to 30 years after his death, close to 70 AD, which we know the Roman government at the time destroyed and ransacked the city of Jerusalem, mostly because of a rebellion which largely stemmed from the existence of Christ. So I don't think historically there's anything wrong with believing that a man named Christ exists. And it's the teachings of the man Christ that have been preserved and passed down since his life that I choose to believe and I choose to worship this man. There's more and better preserved portions of the Greek New Testament than there are of Shakespeare, which was around just 400 years ago. And nobody would disagree that Shakespeare existed. But Shakespeare also didn't claim to be God and want people to worship him, whereas Jesus did. He did claim to be the Messiah that ancient Jews believed would free their people from some kind of suffering. There are countless thousands of years of this belief among Paleo Jews and then modern Hebrew and Jewish people that this Messiah figure would come in a certain way at a certain time, and Jesus seemed to fulfill that. He certainly claimed that he fulfilled it. Again, that's my belief that he did. But I also believe that there are many things in the book of Daniel in the Bible, as well as the book of Ezekiel and Revelation, that seem to be accurately prophetic. They mention governments that never existed in their day, but describe governments that would exist, and they seem to have existed and do still exist right now. Uh, Certain details, like in the book of Revelation, there would be a stage in human life where buying, selling, and trading couldn't be done with tangible currency, but it would be done using a certain device or a mark that is imprinted on the human body, their face, their head, their hand, and that this currency would weigh as much as the wind, which is nothing. Well, in an ancient person's mind, that don't really mean anything, or it's not easy to understand. But we see that right now. It does seem awfully prophetic that there are cases where the sun is captured in a jar and thrown down at a certain landmass, and the explosion and the aftermath from it causes water to become intolerable to drink, and it makes the people sick. Well, that sounds like a nuclear explosion. And we also see the migration of the Jews. That is very verifiable that the Jews, after Rome destroyed their capital city, and as found in the book of Jeremiah, chapter 24 in the Bible, the Jews were dispersed from their land. That's a historic fact. And that they would all be brought back to their historic land much, much later in the future. And that's what we see now in 1949. The Jews finally came back to their historic area in what is called Palestine. And they've been forming a nation, and they have now reformed their nation ever since. And for some reason, they just keep going there. And Jews from all over the world are going back there to help repopulate this uninhabited place for a long time, where that didn't happen for 3,000 years. And it is just now happening again. So, um, I like that Jesus, as we historically think, claimed that people should love each other just because that you don't ever love somebody only based on utilitarian merits, what they can do for you. That would be wrong. That you just love somebody and just because, without them needing to earn it. And that if somebody is hungry, thirsty, or naked, that you provide those things for them. It's never permissible in the Bible to not provide those three things to anybody, including your own enemy, which seems to be an anti natural human response. If you have an enemy, why would you provide for them? Whereas Jesus would say, if your enemy is destitute, you need to provide it. You need to love them. So I like that. And then I like that if all of this other stuff is true, the promise of an afterlife is true. Of course, humans have no way of measuring the afterlife. We don't have a meter that can scan it and measure its energy and determine it. We don't have that. That don't mean it's not there. It just means that we hadn't found how to open that door yet. We're very early into this whole learning stuff thing, and there's so much in pop culture about parallel universes and dimensions and other things. We just simply don't know what is there and what's not. We don't have ways right now of measuring it, but we can in the future. So that's why I believe it.
Awesome,
And my
man.
dog bark.
Yeah. All right. So based on everything that you told me, um, do you think that it would be wise for other people to also follow Jesus Christ?
I do. I think with the Christian faith, there's a lot of exclusivity that it is in a lot of ways unlike other world religions. And I think that if God is who this man Jesus said he is, that it would be extremely wise to know who he is. As that is, Jesus said things like, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but by me. So, yes, if God as presented in Christianity is true, we should definitely know who he is. As God, told by Jesus, claimed to be male. So we should learn who he is and learn what he wants and do what he says. And if the afterlife that he has promised is real, then we should prepare for it and press into it because it sounds pretty good. And the thought that I have about 65 years and then I'm done, that's pretty bleak. I don't want to believe that. I don't want to believe a lie or a fairy tale, but I just hope that there's more. And I believe there's more. And I pray that there's more. And from what it sounds like, heaven is not full, that there's room for untold millions of people. So I would encourage anybody to believe it.
Thank you very much, Brandon. All right.
Yes, sir.
Well, this will conclude Rivas Reasons. Thank you everyone for watching, and see you later.